This is The Strategy Inside Everything. I'm Adam Pierno. The Strategy Inside Everything is the podcast for people who think for a living. If this conversation gives you an idea, leads to a question, or makes you want to push back on something you hear, go to that'snotaninsight.com, where you can leave a message or send me a voicemail. The best and most interesting will be added to the future episodes, and I can't wait to hear from you. All right, welcome back to another episode of The Strategy Inside Everything. We are both terrified for the conversation we're about to as I say,
excited.
Yes, terrified and excited. Thank you. As I say frequently, it took a long time to get this one scheduled. I think we had it on the calendar 2 or 3 times. I don't even know, but I'm really grateful that we're able to get it in today. Sarah, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so delighted to be here, Adam. Thank you.
Today's guest is the principal consultant at Red Current Collective, Sara Lobkovich. Sara, how are you?
I'm good. It's sun's shining. That atmospheric river has moved along for the moment. So it's a good Friday here in Seattle.
Oh, yeah. Well, it is 110 plus here in Arizona. So we are baking. We could use a little river right about now.
We'll try and send some your way.
Before I would gladly accept it. Before we jump into our topic, which is about fear, I wanted you to introduce yourself to the audience and tell them about kind of your career path and how you got to where you are, because it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's like almost everyone here, it's a wacky path.
Yes.
My formal education is as a writer, and so English major. Started with computers in the 5th grade. I can't tell you what year that was, but then
I'm a gentleman. I wouldn't ask.
Yeah, founded my first online content company when I was still in high school with 2 of my teachers, and that was in the early to mid 90s.
That's pretty crazy.
Before back then it was listservs and
bulletin boards,
Usenet groups, Telnet BBSs. So that's how far back my connected communication orientation goes.
Yep.
That's carried through till now, that, and also
that passion.
That passion, and also the kind of being able to observe and listen globally, and hear conversation beyond that. I grew up in a teeny tiny town, so getting outside the walls of my physical upbringing. Then, so early career in technology and writing led to mid-career as a lawyer. So I'm another one of those. Yeah. So, went to law school, practiced law for about 4.5 years, and then had an opportunity to shift to working in public policy. And that was, I went to law school to help people and work on some specific civil rights related, human rights law kind of work, which I got to do, which was really rewarding and amazing. And then moved into the public policy sphere, not practicing law, on environmental outreach.
Nice.
But then by that point in my life, I was climbing I'm a rock climber, mountaineer. Of course. I was climbing about half time, writing about climbing, really active as an early influencer in the outdoor industry, while doing this outreach, work in public policy. And then ultimately that moved me into the work that became my advertising and strategy career. So
the natural transition from public policy and rock climbing into advertising.
It doesn't make any sense unless for me, it makes perfect sense how the things tie together and one leads to the next, and then in advertising, I kind of came in through the side door. There was a huge need in trying to think of what the years were, between like 2012 and 2016, there was just an enormous need for strategic ops support around content and distribution, planning, content strategy. So I came into advertising through the content strategy door, and then landed in strategy and planning.
Got it.
So worked in strategy and planning in big advertising, and then that led to what I do now, which is basically I consult with organizations and people who drive real outcomes in the world to help them develop goals and approaches to implementation that help them do better, not just look better. So
and that's the focus on the OKRs that allow people to break these big things into doable, achievable parts.
Exactly. And objectively measurable progress. It was, as a content strategist and then even as a brand strategist, my craving was for impact and measurable impact. Client happiness was not a measure of success that I am wired for. I am wired for impact, human impacts. Like, how do we make the world meaningfully better?
Yeah. And how do you measure it?
And how do you measure that? Yep.
That's
so
awesome.
That's how this, that's kind of how it all evolved, and how those funny dots connect to each other.
When did you found Red Current?
I formed the business in early 2020. I had moved out of a W-2 consulting position and planned to launch in early 2020. And because I pay attention to what's happening in the world, saw some news reports that made me think it might be important to have health insurance.
Yeah.
And to have not be launching two businesses, because we were launching our other business at that time. So I formed the company, decided not to launch, and did one more W-2 job, partly so that we could get our other business off the ground, and partly to have, basic kind of stability. It was great. That job I took was a great opportunity, to learn, and learned a ton in that role.
Yeah, and then gave you more time to think about it too.
Gave me more time to refine my brand, and really plan who I do this for and what I thought what shape the work would take. So then formal launch was in March of 2021. And we're up and running and going gangbusters.
Yeah. I mean, there's no shortage of people, I would imagine, that are looking to do what you described, which is figure out how to measure whether the work you're doing is having an impact. There's so, especially once you have seen digital metrics, you're like, why isn't everything measurable?
Yeah, you'd be really surprised. I mean, there's still a heavy emphasis on the appearance of progress and the appearance of measures and metrics.
Yeah, so tracking things, figuring those metrics out is really hard. So let's skip it and just figure out what's the BS metric we can put on it.
Yeah, or what makes us feel good about our work. So that's why we really focus on organizations and leaders where there's no argument that the outcomes are meurable. Right. We work to improve safety, to reduce risk. We work with organizations that are working to improve educational outcomes, meaningful access outcomes. So, we've really tried to. We do a lot of exploratory conversations because there are people and leaders who are invested in actually doing better in every industry, every field, every industry. But we do see some patterns in education, in certain parts of technology, innovation, in automotive and motorsports, where there are big human outcomes, that meaningful improvement, doing better instead of just having pretty slides.
Yeah. Oh God, don't get me started on slide creation.
I know. It's the worst. I know.
And that is part of what I wanted to talk to you about is, I think if I have to go all the way back in time and remember this, I think I asked a question about what would happen if you weren't afraid at work. How would that change your performance? Something like that. My tweets auto delete, so I don't know for sure, but
that was what it was.
Okay. Yeah. So I knew it was about fear, obviously, but I was coming out of a meeting at work where I could tell someone was visibly terrified, like scared for their job. And I thought, oh, I got to talk to that person to make sure they're okay. And I thought, wow, what would be unlocked if they just didn't have that fear? And I think you're the exact right person to talk to about it because of the way you're measuring outcomes for impact. Give me the background on fear at work and how common do you think it is in the industries you touch and the organizations you wade into?
The fear is perhaps the largest barrier to impact in the organizations I work with. A huge part of what we do is actually, the side effect. Organizations and leaders bring us in because they want to achieve more.
Yep.
They want more impact. Our how helps recognize that fear may be one of the things holding organizational performance back.
Yeah.
And fear at work comes from all different places.
Let's talk about it. Yeah. Tell me more.
Fear at work can come from our conditioning. It can have nothing, it's like it might have nothing to do with our work lives. Fear at work can come from past workplace or otherwise trauma. Fear at work can come from not knowing what the criteria for success is. That's, for me, that was a huge part of what led to me doing this work.
That is scary.
It's like when you don't know what the measures of success are, or when you're in my career in advertising, even working in the space that I did was subjectively evaluated, so I could do my best work. We could even win the work in the room and then lose it in procurement, things like that, so I just became really fascinated with how do we remain motivated when we're in subjectively evaluated environments.
Yeah.
And increasingly for me, the answer was, let's reduce subjective evaluation criteria. Let's replace subjective evaluation with objective measures of success that we all can agree on and align toward and work toward together. That was rather unpopular in advertising.
Quantifying and making measurable goals that people could know how they're tracking against.
Yeah. There was a lot of resistance,
why is that?
Now, I think I didn't have an answer at the time. Now I think there's sometimes a resistance to objectively measurable targets in creative circles because creative can be inherently subjective. When I work with creative teams now, what we get to do is get creative about the goals we set. We can apply the same creativity that leads to subjectively excellent or subjectively poor, work. We can apply that creativity to ask and answer the question, what are our clients' measures of success? What do we have to do to win with the client? But then also knowing that if we only set those outcome goals around, we're going to win this work, we're going to get the client promoted, the same things that are in all of our, pre-pitch goals. What we're missing is performance goals. We're missing, how do we want to feel about our work? Or what are the rewards for us of doing this work, even if the client isn't happy or satisfied? So that became the passion for me, is, for me, partly existing I worked in some really healthy workplaces, and I worked in some extremely unhealthy workplaces. And so, there was fear in both types. When you're in a healthy, high performing, awesome workplace, there's the fear of, did I just do my best work? Am I good enough? Am I going to be able to pull that out again? Fear for a whole host of fears. Fear, what if we get acquired? What if the client fires? There are fears in the healthy workplaces. And then in the less healthy workplaces for us, there's all the additional fears around whatever the unhelpful voices are in our head.
Those get amplified.
They get amplified in those less healthy environments. I
think those interpersonal fears are more of the fears that affect me more directly. Like if I have goals and they're numerical, or, I know what I'm aiming for, I can sort of self-soothe and calm myself down and just go look at them and say, okay, I'm tracking, I'm okay, or I'm behind, but at least I can make a plan to catch up. I think it's more the political stuff and the stuff you can't control, of like, what if this person at the top doesn't like this other person at the top, and that trickles all the way down? Is my job going to be safe? Those kinds of things are really stressful, that you're like, well, now do I have to overachieve for both my reputation and that person's reputation? So hopefully someone notices that I'm different or worth saving.
Yeah, I think the flexibility that we develop when we put ourselves in the driver's seat of our careers by embracing goal setting. It doesn't have to be organizational goals.
Right.
That was the transformation for me, was setting, literally objectives and key results for my own work and growth and development and career. That was the big light bulb moment for me. Then when I had that for myself, that made everything that came at me interesting information. So then I can decide whether to react to it. But then when the leader above the leader and the client and the whatever, this is fun to have this conversation with the strategist, because that let me get curious and observant, and then say, how does this help or hurt my ability to achieve the goals that I've set for myself?
How often do you give yourself permission to rewrite those goals or edit them?
It depends. So when I'm working organizationally,
classic strategy answer.
No, and lawyer. But it's actually a pretty simple answer. If I'm working with other people, so if we're working organizationally, there is a benefit to setting our goals and then not changing them.
Yes.
So we set our goals, we lock them in for whatever the agreed period is. Might be the duration of a project, might be a quarter, whatever that is. We've got a duration in mind. Mm-hmm. We set the goals, we lock them in, and no matter what happens, we don't change them. We might decide that one is sending us in the wrong direction. So if that's the case, then we just cross that one out. We retire it. But when we're working with other people, it's really helpful then to lock the goals for a certain amount of time and see what we learn in trying to achieve that goal. So with the model that I advocate for and work with, we're typically setting clearly identified either aspirational goals where progress and learning is a win, whether or not we achieve the outcome, or we're clarifying, is this a commitment that has to be hit 100%? Because there's some kind of risk or consequence if it isn't. So when we have that clarity, then we can set the goals, we can work to them, for whatever the duration is that makes sense, and then get to the end and say, how did we do and what did we learn?
But there's some that I'm guessing that you're going to say there are some times where we have to flex.
Yeah. Especially on duration, once we learn, I do work with objectives and key results. I work with an approach to objectives and key results that's our connected strategic brand. Like it's a different flavor of objectives and key results that wraps objectives and key results ultimately in some measurement modeling and in some learning agenda, work. And so, when we do that, then we learn the words and meanings of this toolkit, and then they can be more flexibly applied. So once we learn the words and meanings, then they become words with meanings that have a job that we can use them for. And, then the durations can become more fluid, in individual goal setting, and then right now I have two folks on our team.
Yeah.
We're more fluid because we know what the words and meanings are that we're working with. So we can say this goal is a quarter, we're going to work on this for about a quarter. Another one we're going to work on till we get it done, But so there's more flexibility when you're setting and working towards goals singularly.
But how much of that space in understanding or the lack of precision of language or precision of understood language among a group leads to an anxiety or an uncertainty where it's like, well, I think they mean this, but I'm not really sure if they mean this. How much have you seen that is a contributor to fear?
Hugely. And that is why we take the approach we do. When we don't have externalized goals, so when we're in an organization where everyone's working hard and doing their best work, we're all going to work hard and do our best work, or where we only have those the outcome measures, like we're going to win this pitch, we're going to win X award, we're going to achieve 100,000 new followers for a client or a certain engagement rate. Those outcome goals are motivating sometimes if they're within the realm of possibility. They're
the further they are from reality, the less motivating they are. I think people
exactly.
Sounds good, buddy. Go for it.
Yeah, exactly. But those kind of goals, and that's what a lot of organization, that's a lot of the goals that we have to work with in organizations are those big. If we put it in a athletics analogy, we're going to win the race. There is a healthy amount of motivation that comes from wanting to win the race. That is motivating. That is if we're an athlete and we're training and we've got the right tools, that's a healthy amount of stress. That is stress that contributes to performance. But to carry the athletics analogy, if all we're focused on is winning that race, what if we get injured during training? What if we have a bad weather day? What if Danilo Petrucci shows up from, to ride in Moto America in the superbike class? There are factors beyond our control in whether or not we can achieve whether we can achieve that outcome goal. That most of our goal setting is set around. So then that's where the fear comes from, is that we don't all agree on what our performance measures are. We all agree we're going to try and win, but we don't have shared goals around, if we don't win, how are we successful? Or if we don't win, what are we working on learning together?
Right, because theoretically in that construct, you could set a personal record or a team record and finish third.
Yes.
Shouldn't that still be considered some kind of a success?
Yes.
If you set the right goals, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because then you'd know, what did we set out to learn together? For me, I was the guy on the plane during my agency life. Like, I was the one that got put on the plane, and sometimes I didn't know where I was going. And then I would answer the questions on the plane and then walk into the room and then it's like, and that's
I've
not,
done this
it wasn't
job as well.
Yeah. Like, it wasn't always like that. Like, there were often much more lengthy, that was, but like, that was a part of my job, was to be the guy on a plane. And I had to find a way to keep my motivation up to do that every day, when nothing there set me up for success to do my best work. So then I could set my own performance criteria. So
what was your fear level during that? Like, because that is a weird, on some level, sometimes that role is very freeing, because it's, you say, well, they've sent me out into the wilderness with no tools. Let's see what happens. What can I make out of this? And so in some ways it can be freeing, but yeah, there's a lot of anxiety when there's 30 people back on your team at the office that are relying on you to figure it out on the plane and come back with answers that lead to whatever billable work you need to sell.
Exactly. That's why I joked at the beginning about being terrified and excited to talk to you today. I said I was a climber, and one of my old climbing partners had 2 little girls, and we'd go climbing and take the girls out, and then, put the kids on the rope, and they would start to climb. And then inevitably someone had a bad day. And so someone winds up crying. Sometimes that happens in climbing. And I heard, my friend's name was Paul. So when one of his little girls got scared, he'd look at her and say, well, honey, how are you doing? What are you feeling? And she'd say, I'm scared. And then he'd say, all right, what else are you feeling? And then she'd think for a sec and say, I'm really tired, or I'm hungry, or I'm excited, And so I didn't realize how important that would be. Paul, thank you. Like, I'm going to send him a thank you note. Like, I didn't realize how important seeing him do that with his little girls was for how I went from where I was to where I am today. Because that's the question. It's like, in that situation, the first few times I was the guy on the plane, I was just terrified, but you do it a couple times and then it's like, I'm learning, like, I'm figuring out how to do this. Like, speaking on my feet isn't my strong suit. I teach, so I develop curriculum, I rehearse it, and then I deliver it. Same thing. Like, that was a challenge for me as a lawyer to be able to speak on my feet.
Why did those mean people put you in that position?
Because clients trusted me. I could establish the trust, and it's my self-limiting. I almost just said a bad word, but it's my self-limiting stuff that makes me afraid. Yeah. So when, you get a couple reps under your belt, and then it's like, gosh, this is a fun puzzle. This is something that I can figure out my way to do that fits me. And if I'm only focused on bringing back the win of the work, I'm not going to do my best work. So how can I refine my practice, my approach, my toolkit? I think that's why this is so much fun to do. I really focus on, I call them thinky doers, strategic operators, like thinkers who have to generate outcomes.
Yes.
Because then the the work I'm working on reducing to publish now is work that I've been learning for 20 years now. And that's, like more of that good stuff has to get repeated and repeated and revved to get into the world.
And is that repetition, the first time you were the guy on the plane, you were scared. The fifth time, was it just the repetition, or did you create a process for yourself to create the goals, or to say, okay, well, here are the 3 things I want to learn on this flight, on this trip? Which was more, which do you think weighed in more to overcoming the anxiety and fear of that?
It's definitely the practice building. So this is where my motorsports life comes up to. It's like I co-own a Seat Up Moto Racing. It's a Moto America national US level road racing team and speed shop. So my other life is in high performance motorsports.
You don't strike me, your tone as we're talking, I knew this about you, but now that we're speaking for the first time, your tone doesn't really jive with what I would imagine that motocross world is as an outsider. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's always a bit of a curveball. It's even worse. I do road racing. So sport bikes it's like F1 on motorcycles, basically. It's, again, this is something like it doesn't make any sense externally to people who meet me in certain capacities, but there's a belonging that I have found among thinky doers. Like, this is why I was so excited to talk to you. It's like, you're one of the folks that creates inclusiveness and belonging in this field that isn't present everywhere. I've found I might still be in advertising if I had found this kind of belonging in advertising. I left advertising to create my own belonging in the consulting practice that I have now.
Right.
And, I found my belonging and my people in motorsports. And I came into it in a weird way. Like, I came into it purely practical so that I could, here in Washington, if you're on a motorcycle, you get to go to the front of the ferry line. So when I was in law school, when I decided to go to law school, I was I guess
Sarah, this actually makes 100% sense based on my limited knowledge of you. I'm like, oh yeah, of course, there's an absolute practical reason why you got into motorcycles. Yes, this makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. I don't know many people that get into motorcycles for practical reasons, but yes.
No, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Midlife crisis. Like, I should be going out and buying a bike just because it's like, I got to do something irrational now.
No, if I'm going to go to law school in Seattle and I'm going to live in Kitsap County, the only way to make that possible is to learn how to ride a motorcycle. It started earlier than that. Like, I grew up in Port Townsend. So Officer and a Gentleman and Richard Gere and the motorcycle. And then, I had childhood. When I was, by the time I was 16, I knew that I would have 2 wheels, a van someday, which I do now. And the third piece was like, I always wanted to live in Portland, and I haven't lived in Portland, but I do love Portland still. But those were the 3 things I knew about myself.
You're a motorcycle ride away.
Yeah. Yep. And so, so again, it's like I got into motorcycling for practical reasons, but then I found it terrifying. And I was going to say,
there's an exhilaration that is both fear and excitement.
For me, it's less my adrenaline system is a little atypical, so I'm not a thrill seeker, despite riding motorcycles and climbing rocks. And
you did it to jump the ferry line. You didn't do it because you were looking for a rush.
No, I did it to jump the fairy line. I did it because it's hard for me, because I kind of find my zen when things are challenging. And those things, the work I've done, the work I do now, it's all on that cusp of stress that helps us perform better and fear. It's like, it's always kind of in that tension.
Does the zen that you get from writing and the calm that you find in your work come from knowing that you have to be tracking 3-4 things at the same time for the ride to be successful? Whether that's a race or just, on a bike when 2 wheels in what I can imagine is very often slippery conditions. Like if you're not paying attention to all those things at all times, disaster is ahead, and work can be the same way in knowledge work, where if you're not paying attention to all the goals, at least peripherally, whoops.
Yeah, I think that's such an awesome question. I'm really excited to answer it because I've never answered it before.
Have you thought of it before?
No, no. Okay. I just do what I think. The reason it's such an exciting question is that I wasn't born and conditioned this way. Like I was born and conditioned to be afraid of everything, and to I had some early childhood trauma, so I've got some stuff that I live with. I also have some executive functioning challenges that may stem from trauma, may stem from, other brain chemistry, diagnosis, whatever. So I didn't begin my life with the skills to be able to slow down what was coming at me and then consciously respond to it. The skill set that I now have has been really hard earned over the course of a whole lot of years to be able to, this is wild to say this out loud, but basically to recover. So it is an ongoing process for me now in my mid-40s of recovery that I think is what sometimes I think about, like how much of this is unhealthy adaptation to my traumas and upbringing and environment. But having this conversation is like, no, this is actually like a massive recovery playground for me. That whether it, and I didn't have as strong of skills when I was climbing seriously, but the sport of motorcycling and doing the work that I do in my professional life, the way I now do it, both of those things have let me continue. Both of those things have let me continue building my toolkit for slowing down my experience of what's coming at me and being able to make, I said that interesting information joke earlier, which isn't a joke. It's like is what's coming at me a actual risk? Is what's coming at me abuse? Is what's coming at me harmful? Or is what's coming at me setting off my alarm? Or is what's coming at me interesting information that I can slow down my system and process?
Yeah.
And so, I think that's what it is, because I didn't start out a great rider. I'm a very highly trained motorcyclist. Thanks to finding, I work with some of the best coaches in the US, and they work with me even though I'm slow, because I'm so dedicated to learning, but thanks to all that work, it's like, it's the same thing. It's just finding the place where you can practice. And not everyone, it has to be recovery, but whatever the skills are that help you practice slowing what's coming at you down so that you can separate your thinking, feeling, and doing and be intentional about each. Take care of your needs.
With your response, but you're doing it in a way that has been processed by you and not just a reaction.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And that's what half of the fear is a non-processed response.
Yeah, it's, I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not a neuroscientist.
Give it time, Sarah. There's still time.
No more school. No more school that isn't motorcycle related. We've got, when we talk about fear, and I see this a lot when people are engaging with fear in their work lives. Again, like I find it helpful to break it down. Are we experiencing the chemistry of fear? Is something harmful triggering fear? Which it's really important that we don't slow our, that is like react.
Yeah.
Like if something is harming you, then react.
And you have to react.
And we should. And some of us have trauma histories that mean that we don't. And I did see that a lot in my advertising. It's like the freeze response was, I experienced it and I saw my team experience it, a lot of freeze. And so that's one of the really rewarding things I do now is you get to react if you're being harmed. And that is a controversial statement that reflects my privilege. But I believe other people might not receive it this way. But like, if you're being harmed, react. You get to get angry. You get to say no. You get to protect yourself.
If that's what protects you. Yeah.
Yeah. And if we all can develop the skills to be able to identify, am I being harmed or am I feeling fear? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling fear or anxiety because of voices in my head that are true or not? It's like, that's where the slowing down.
Is my self-talk building on something, or is what I'm processing now building on my own self-talk that is fueling anxiety that doesn't even exist?
Yes.
Or is this legitimately harmful or threatening in a way that I need to react to?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a hard thing to know how to process in real time or any amount of time. I mean, that's a lesson you have to learn. That is training you have to get.
If that, if that kind of sparks something for any of your listeners, the place that I actually, and I think this would be different for different people, but the place that I found that ability was in bystander intervention training.
Yeah, I've studied this a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's like, I didn't expect that. I mean, I'm still an activist. I can't help myself. My injustice intolerance and injustice sensitivity is like, if I had a ranking, like that is at the top of who I am and what I do. And I'm lucky to live in a place that has like formal bystander intervention training. And there was a point in my bystander intervention training and then in my activism where I had to decide where to place my body in terms of risk. Mm-hmm. And in bystander intervention, that's where we learn the skills to slow down what's happening and then make conscious decisions about what we do next.
Mm-hmm.
And, for me, it took that. It took literal bystander intervention training to then develop the skills to recognize my chemistry. I'm going to have the flood of chemicals when something happens, and then I can react emotionally to the flood of chemicals, or I can feel the chemicals, let them dissipate, and then decide.
Yeah, but it takes awareness of the process that's going to happen. It does. Yeah, in advance.
Yeah, it does. But yeah, I was thinking about that this morning before we got on the line. Where did that ability come from for me? And for me, it was in bystander intervention training, and then in the physical decisions I had to make as a bystander.
Yeah.
And then once you've done it in that capacity, then it applies to others.
Yeah. You were able to internalize it and say, oh yeah, I can apply this all these other ways.
Yep. I feel a responsibility to share this stuff with other people.
I'm grateful that you did.
I talk about my personal history in a very no shame way, because when we are harmed, there's no shame.
So you actually didn't do anything?
Yeah. I mean, I've done lots of things that I'm not proud. It's I have inflicted harm, but in terms of these things in my life that have contributed to me working on this toolkit, I just have no shame about those things. And so being able to then share practices, and also share enough of my life story. I don't think people should have to suffer to develop this toolkit.
But you're also saying you shouldn't have to hide your trauma.
No, but if I can, do what I do, that isn't, I guess at some point it was a conscious decision, and I make the decision about what I'm going to share in a given moment. But I make that decision and I don't have any shame about what I choose to share. And then any longer, I don't think people should have to survive trauma to build this toolkit.
Right.
So there are people who can listen and say, I can work on learning a toolkit for slowing down my emotional reactivity. I can learn a toolkit for making conscious decisions when my fear chemicals go off. So it's kind of the pointy end thing. It's I do things that put me in objectively dangerous situations, and that has led to a toolkit that then you don't have to be in objectively dangerous situations for that toolkit to be usable and useful.
Still get the benefit.
And still get the benefit. Yeah. So it feels to me, it feels like a bit of a mission on both fronts.
Sara, thank you so much for making time and joining me today. I really appreciate it. Sara, where can people find you online?
We're building out our mailing list right now for Red Current Collective, my practice, and the Thinky Doers community that's coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can add yourself to the email list for that at findrc.co/subscribe.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're just getting started with Red Current Collective on Instagram. So it's redcurrent_co on Instagram. And Red Current here is CURRANT. Nothing in my world is easy to spell.
I will definitely add those links to this to this episode.
Awesome.
Sara, thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam. This has been a blast.
Awesome.
Strategy Inside Everything is produced by me, Adam Pierno. If you like what you've heard, leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Actually, I have no idea if that helps or if it's ever done anybody any good. If you really want to help the show and you like what you've heard, share it with someone else you think will dig it. That's the best way to help the show and keep the conversation growing. If you have an idea, a question, or want to push back, go to that'snotaninsight.com, where you can send me a message or leave me a voicemail that will be added to future shows. Music for the Strategy Inside Everything is by Saw Square Noise. For more information on me, you can go to adampierno.com to learn about my books, my speaking, and my consulting practice. Thanks for listening.